had what I will describe as a frank but also constructive discussion.
How important it is from our side to strengthen our cooperation with the United States, but that doesn't mean that we want to be owned by the United States.
This is Today As It Happened. Good Wednesday evening to you. I'm Andrew Rafferty here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day, from a meeting between top Trump administration officials and the foreign minister of Greenland to human rights groups sounding the alarm over the killing of protesters in Iran. But first, let's take a look at some of our other top stories of the day. Measles outbreaks are exploding across the U.S., with 124 new cases confirmed in South Carolina since Friday. Spartanburg County has now reached 434 total cases. A separate outbreak along the Arizona-Utah border has infected 418 people since August. Last year was the nation's worst for measles since 1991, with 2,144 cases across 44 states and 3 deaths. The highly contagious virus is preventable through vaccines, which are 97% effective after 2 doses. And a Mississippi grand jury has indicted a 19-year-old man for setting fire to the state's oldest synagogue. Stephen Pittman is charged with first-degree arson of a place of worship with a hate crime enhancement. Prosecutors say the fire appears to have been motivated by religious hatred. Pittman confessed to the crime and could face up to 60 years in prison if convicted. He's due back in court on January 20th. And civil rights pioneer Claudette Colvin has died at the age of 86. Colvin's 1955 arrest for refusing to give up her seat on a segregated Montgomery bus helped spark the modern civil rights movement. She was just 15 years old when she was arrested on March 2, 1955. That was months before Rosa Parks gained international fame for the same act of defiance. Colvin became a plaintiff in the landmark lawsuit that outlawed racial segregation on Montgomery's buses. And actor Timothy Busfield has turned himself in to New Mexico authorities on child sex abuse charges. The 68-year-old faces 2 counts of criminal sexual contact with a minor and 1 count of child abuse. He's accused of inappropriately touching twin boys who were 7 years old when the alleged abuse began in 2022. The boys were on a show Busfield was directing. He denies the allegations and says he did nothing wrong. He's known for roles in 30-something in The West Wing and is married to actress Melissa Gilbert. Iran's judiciary chief is signaling fast trials and executions for protesters as the death toll from nationwide demonstrations reaches at least 2,571 people. The judiciary chief says if we want to do something, we have to do it quickly. His comments come despite warnings from the president, who says the U.S. will take, quote, very strong action if Iran executes protesters. And earlier today, Iran held a mass funeral for 300 security force members killed in the demonstrations over the last week. Meanwhile, activists say Starlink is now offering free internet services to help Iranians get around government shutdowns. Scripps News international correspondent Stuart Smith joins me now live from outside the Iranian embassy in London with more on this developing story. Stuart, good morning. Iran continues to take a strong stance against these protests and the comments coming out here from the U.S. President Donald Trump about a potential military response. What more can you tell us?
Hello.
Yeah, every day we get new updates from human rights organizations working in and outside Iran about the death toll due to these protests. Some of those figures, as Iran would say, do include the number of security personnel included in the riots, but the vast majority, they say, are peaceful protesters who have been killed by Iranian forces, now into the thousands. Tehran continues to insist that this is a foreign plot orchestrated by Israel and or the United States as an attempt to destabilize the political situation for gain, and also that this is an excuse for Washington to intervene. That threat of intervention still very much on the cards. Reportedly, diplomatic channels between Tehran and Washington are now closed, according to sources close to Tehran. As well as that, US military fighter planes and also air-to-air refueling vehicles have been sent to air bases in the region. It looks like certainly military activity is still on the cards, and it could certainly still happen. In response to that threat, Iran says that its defences are ready and that they have improved their defences since Israel attacked Iran months ago, and that also they will fight to the last drop of blood. So certainly in Tehran they are potentially expecting US military action, but trying to say that it will be unsuccessful and very costly for the United States. In the meantime, are protests continuing or not? It's really hard to say. In Tehran they say the protests against the government are largely over, but Iranian activists, including the people I'm with here, are saying that they are still continuing. So the picture there, because of that internet blackout, makes it very hard to know what the latest is going on in the ground in Tehran.
Yeah, and Stuart, it does seem like a pretty active scene where you are. What are some of the sentiments from there about what the greater global community should be doing in response to what we're seeing on the ground in Iran?
Yeah, well, there's particular concern this morning here in London about the threat that there may be the first execution from an Iranian political dissident. Execution is a common policy in Iran for many types of crimes, but it's very unusual to have an execution appearing to be primed to go ahead just a few days after the initial arrest. It's a tactic we've seen Iran use before in previous protests to try and send a very clear message that this is something that they cannot endorse. But whether that has gone ahead or not, we still don't know. There's concern, though, that the activist detained may already be dead, having so much difficulty getting news out of the country. As to what activists here want, well, they said that they are going to call on the United States later, go down to the US Embassy in London. They're going to call on the US to effectively keep its promise, they say, to try and do something about the situation there. You'll see US flags behind me, as well as Iranian pre-revolutionary flags. People around the world saying that it is up to other countries to get involved, to support the protesters. We heard from the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer earlier, who said that this was something that he is looking at, that he is criticising the Tehran authorities, and also that the UK will join international partners with sanctions against Iran.
All right, Stuart Smith for us from London. Stuart, thank you. And now let's take a look at some of the other top headlines of the day. The Washington Post says FBI agents searched Hannah Nathanson's home and seized her cell phone and a Garmin watch. Nathanson covers the Trump administration and recently published a piece describing how she had gained hundreds of new sources. According to an FBI affidavit, the search is part of an investigation into a contractor accused of sharing government secrets. Attorney General Pam Bondi said on X that the warrant was requested by the Department of War and the administration will not tolerate illegal leaks of classified information that pose national security risks. And more than half of U.S. adults believe President Trump has gone too far in using the military to intervene in other countries. A new AP North poll found that 56% of adults think Trump overstepped on military interventions abroad, while majorities disapprove of how the Republican president is handling foreign policy in general and Venezuela in particular. These findings largely cut against Trump's aggressive foreign policy stance, which has recently included efforts to exert control over Venezuela's oil and calls for the U.S. to take over Greenland. Personnel at the largest U.S. base in the Middle East are being urged to evacuate, as according to a U.S. official, about 10,000 U.S. troops are stationed at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. The directive to leave comes after President Trump threatened to take military action in support of protesters in Iran. The base was targeted by Iran in June after the U.S. struck Iran's nuclear facilities. And coming up on Today As It Happened,
I am beyond heartbroken and outraged that the Trump administration's actions led to Renee Nicole Good's murder.
welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories.
New video like the moment an officer shoots a protester in the face with a projectile, leaving him bloodied and seriously hurt. This video out of Santa Ana, California shows the man shouting through a megaphone before he is hit in the face with a non-lethal round and then dragged away by ICE agents. He's now in the hospital recovering. Trisha McLaughlin with Homeland Security calling the group violent rioters, adding that 2 officers were injured during that incident. She did not respond to any questions about the injury of the protester. All of this coming days after heavily armed ICE agents used a battering ram to break through the front door of this home in Minneapolis. The man who was arrested inside was a Liberian who fled the Liberian Civil War as a child. His attorney saying his constitutional rights were violated.
Under Fourth Amendment, your home is your castle, and if you do not invite them in, it is a blatant constitutional violation to break down a door with a battering ram, especially when they know that there's a 9-year-old inside.
DHS saying that arrest was part of the Trump administration's efforts to arrest the, quote, worst of the worst, adding the man had a criminal history that included drug possession. Democrats are outraged, most Republicans, though, silent, even as their poll numbers are sinking. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed is live on Capitol Hill. And Nate, there is an entire state, a major city, that says it is under siege by ICE, and yet where you are on Capitol Hill, there is Republican silence.
Well, Del, look, the real issue up here on Capitol Hill, the growing issue, rather, is the issue of funding the government. You and I have talked about it, week after week. But now, as lawmakers appear to be reaching bipartisan deals on how to fund the government, by and large, the one major issue at this point, the one outstanding funding bill that lawmakers are still talking about behind closed doors, is funding through the Department of Homeland Security, which, of course, includes ICE. Now, there are Democrats up here on Capitol Hill who've maintained, some of whom have openly said they want to abolish ICE in the past, but others saying that they want strict restrictions on ICE, possibly curbing funding, possibly moving around exactly what ICE is able to do, perhaps instituting a body cam policy or requiring that they don't always use masks or more clear identification when they're out patrolling in the streets. That is making it more difficult for lawmakers to reach some sort of bipartisan agreement on funding the government and could potentially lead to a partial government shutdown come January 31st. Here's Congresswoman Ilhan Omar speaking yesterday.
I am beyond heartbroken and outraged that the Trump administration's actions led to Renee Nicole Good's murder. Our caucus members will oppose all funding for immigration enforcement in any appropriation bills until meaningful reforms are enacted to end militarized policing practices. We cannot and we should not continue to fund agencies that operate with impunity.
And look, it depends on which Republicans you talk to, but some are tepid at best about the possibility of curbing funding for ICE, and some remain skeptical that Democrats even want to work with Republicans to find some sort of solution to keep that agency funded, but at the same time possibly make some changes to the way that oversight happens and obviously rein in portions of the department, something that a number of Democrats are looking to accomplish.
Old enough to remember when all members of Congress walked out of the Capitol on September 11th that evening and sang God Bless America. Funding ICE, as you have mentioned, is the responsibility of lawmakers. What progress, though, is being made?
Well, Del, as I just stated, I mean, there is concerns up here on Capitol Hill about reaching some sort of bipartisan agreement. Again, some Republicans are, maintain that they have concerns that Democrats are going to be willing to work with them to find a way to fund the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration, Customs Enforcement, and furthermore, actually reach a bipartisan agreement on that front. Here's a number of Republicans I spoke with earlier today about the possibility of instituting new safeguards and whether they believe their Democratic colleagues even want to fund that agency. As they continue to negotiate the Department of Homeland Security funding package, are there any curbs to ICE that you would be willing to accept? Requirement they wear body cameras, a requirement they not wear face masks in certain circumstances?
Well, certainly the devil's in the details. I want to know what we're talking about here. But, I'm not, body cams, that might be fine.
Do you think there's a bipartisan solution to funding them?
Well, are you going to find a Democrat that's going to say, yeah, let's go fund ICE so they can continue to do their job? No. What they're going to try to do is, there's a member that wants to try to now impeach Christie? No.
And again, there are concerns up here on Capitol Hill about reaching some sort of agreement. Again, they've got until January 31st. That's the day that there would be a partial government shutdown. And in almost every one of the other 11 out of 12 funding bills, it seems like there is progress up here on Capitol Hill. Lawmakers working side by side, Democrats and Republicans working to possibly restore, in some areas, funding that had been stripped by the Trump administration, or finding a way, bipartisan path forward to fund the government. But the Department of Homeland Security and ICE funding, especially given the events in Minneapolis, that remains an issue that Democrats and Republicans are still negotiating behind closed doors, and we do not know exactly what will be proposed when they release a sort of bipartisan agreement, or if they can reach a bipartisan deal. I just spoke with a Democratic lawmaker who told me he thinks ICE has enough money. There's no reason to give them any more next year.
Nate, as we were watching live on the air, House Democrats coming out just moments ago, some of them calling for the impeachment of Kristi Noem. As you know, chances of that happening right now in this Congress are slim and nil. But the polling numbers seem to indicate that they're losing support among the American public on the issue of immigration. What happens if the House flips?
Well, I think impeachment certainly becomes a possibility. You know, some Democrats are all but champing at the bit to say that they want to impeach certain members of Trump's cabinet and possibly even the President of the United States himself. And look, I think there's a concern that messaging that around the midterms might not be the wisest move. At least some Democrats have expressed, some concerns on that front. But at the same time, I mean, I think there are a number of Democrats who have said quite clearly that they think that Trump administration officials, cabinet officials, the president himself have committed actions that run contrary to the Constitution, are possibly impeachable offenses. And so I think there's no illusions that the impeachments are a very real possibility should Democrats retake the House of Representatives in the midterm elections later this year.
Straight ahead on Today As It Happened.
I'm Joe St. George in Washington. President Trump wants to cap credit card interest rates and limit big companies from buying single-family homes. That may sound like a great idea, but we've uncovered a great deal of skepticism with these plans. We explain that next.
Thanks for staying with us on Today As It Happened. I'm Andrew Rafferty with your daily look at the day's biggest stories. The State Department is suspending visa processing for 75 countries, including Iran. The State Department says it instructed consular officers to hold immigration visa applications while the department re-examines screening and vetting procedures. The countries include Iran, Somalia, Russia, and Afghanistan. Somalia has drawn heightened scrutiny from federal officials following a sweeping fraud scandal centered in Minnesota. That pause will begin on January 21st. And President Trump made what looked like an obscene gesture and mouthed an expletive at a factory worker during a tour of a Ford plant in Michigan Tuesday. Cell phone video captured Trump twice mouthing what seemed like the F word and raising his middle finger toward a heckler on the factory floor. The worker had shouted "pedophile protector" at the president. The White House called Trump's response, quote, appropriate given the heckling. That worker, TJ Sabula, says he has no regrets, but has been suspended from his job pending an investigation. An online fundraiser for Sabula has raised more than $150,000.
President Donald Trump has recently announced a number of new policy proposals aimed at affordability, one of the biggest issues on the minds of Americans. And while capping credit card interest rates and limiting who can buy a single-family home may sound like a good idea, we've already discovered there's a great deal of skepticism with these plans and whether or not they'll actually work.
We're making America great again like never before.
President Donald Trump in Michigan Tuesday, once again discussing his vision for an improved economy in the coming months. On social media, the president has been outlining a litany of new proposals as of late. On January 9th, President Trump said this about credit cards. Effective January 20th, 2026, I, as President of the United States, am calling for a one-year cap on credit card interest rates of 10%. On January 7th, he said, I'm immediately taking steps to ban large institutional investors from buying more single-family homes, and I will be calling on Congress to codify it. When you hear that idea, what goes through your mind?
Yeah, I think it's a very good idea.
When you ask people out and about interest rate caps, it's hard to find disagreement. How much money do you think that could save your family?
Maybe $200, $300 a month.
But when you talk to experts, you realize there is major skepticism over whether these ideas will actually be good for consumers in the long term.
It sounds great, but it will have catastrophic ramifications for the total economy.
Richard Hunt is with the Electronic Payments Coalition, which represents credit unions and banks. An analysis by his group found that limited interest rates would result in banks limiting access to credit, cashback programs, and travel rewards would be slashed too.
If you were to cap interest rates on credit cards, 82% of cardholders would lose their credit card.
As far as President Trump's plan to limit major investors from buying single-family homes, there is skepticism there too.
It's not really going to accomplish anything.
Daryl Fairweather is the chief economist at Redfin. She says large institutional investors make up only a small share of home buyers nationally and would likely be replaced by smaller investors should a large-scale ban occur.
It's not necessarily going to open up inventory for first-time home buyers. The reason that housing is so unaffordable is because we're about 4 million houses short.
Coming up on Today As It Happened, well, President Donald Trump actually tried to buy Greenland. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with top officials from Greenland and Denmark Wednesday to discuss Trump's plans for a U.S. takeover of the Arctic island. Scripps News international correspondent Ross Cullen gave us the story after the break. Welcome back to Today As It Happened, Scripps News end-of-day snapshot of our biggest stories. Let's pick up where we left off.
Greenland said today, we prefer to stay with Denmark. Do you see that as the...
Who said that?
The premier of Greenland.
Well, that's their problem. That's their problem. I disagree with them. I don't know who he is, don't know anything about him, but that's going to be a big problem for him.
President Trump not backing down on his plans for the U.S. to get Greenland, once again saying that America needs it for national security. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio meeting with diplomats from Denmark and Greenland earlier today. Tensions, understandably, were high. Scripps News international correspondent Ross Cullen is live in Nuuk, Greenland. And Ross, Greenland officials just had an answer. What stood out for you as they held this news conference?
Yeah, that's right. They did. They were saying that there are clearly disagreements, fundamental disagreements. Greenland and Denmark have their red lines that they're not prepared to cross. Greenland is a self-governing territory that is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but the United States would still like to acquire Greenland somehow. They did say, the two foreign ministers, they were unable to change the US position, unable to change the minds of J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, and Greenland and Denmark are not going to be compromising on their red lines, that for now Greenland is a part of Denmark and that's how it should remain. They do not want this territory to be bought or acquired by the United States. They say the US is a very close ally of Denmark. In fact, the foreign minister of Denmark, he noted just how many soldiers had lost their lives in Afghanistan when Denmark joined the United States after 9/11 in serving alongside US soldiers. More soldiers died per capita as part of the Danish armed forces than any other nation who'd served as part of that coalition, underscoring just how closely they have been working together. They are both NATO allies. There's no reason for this disagreement, they were saying. And the Greenlandic Foreign Minister, Vivian Motzfeldt, before she comes back here to Nuuk, was saying that we are allies. And Denmark and Greenland and the United States are friends. We cooperate on a range of issues. We had a constructive and frank conversation, but she did also hint that it's not over yet, saying that high-level meetings will continue.
Scripps News international correspondent Ross Cullen for us live in Nuuk, Greenland. Ross, thank you very much. The president taking questions. Let's take a listen.
Mr. President, on Iran, you said that the killing has stopped. Who told you that the killings have stopped there? And if it's the Iranian regime?
We have been informed by very important sources on the other side, and they've said the killing has stopped and the executions won't take place. There was supposed to be a lot of executions today, and that the executions won't take place. And we're going to find out. I mean, I'll find out after this. You'll find out. But we've been told on good authority, and I hope it's true. Who knows, right? Who knows?
We've
Crazy
seen the body
world.
bags, so how do you trust
No,
them?
you've seen that over the last few days, and they said people were shooting at them with guns, and they were shooting back, and it's one of those things. But they told me that there'll be no executions, and so I hope that's true.
Does this mean military action is now off the table against Iran?
We're going to watch it and see what the process is, but we were given a very good statement by people that are aware of what's going on.
Is that still considering military action?
When they say no executions, everyone is talking about a lot of executions were taking place today. We were just told no executions. I hope that's true. That's a big thing. Yes, ma'am.
The foreign minister of Greenland, she said a while ago in a press conference in an embassy of Denmark that she made very clear in the meeting that happened here in the White House what are their limits. She also said that it was a very respectful meeting. Are those limits going to be respected?
Well, we're going to see what happens with Greenland. We need Greenland for national security, so we're going to see what happens. They're going to brief me on the meeting right after this conference. In fact, the sooner I get you out, the faster I'm going to know exactly what happened. But we have a very good relationship with Denmark, as you know. We'll see. But, we're doing the Golden Dome. We're doing a lot of things, and we really need it. If we don't go in, Russia's going to go in, and China's going to go in. And there's not a thing that Denmark can do about it, but we can do everything about it.
There's no more in what they can do there?
Well, we're going to see. I mean, look, we're going to see what happens, but we need it. I'm not the first one. This was talked about by President Truman, and 40 years before President Truman, they were talking about it. They've been talking about this for 100 years. This is not anything so new. A lot of people don't realize that, but this was a hot subject. Probably not as hot as it is now, but it was a hot subject for a long time. We need it for national security, and that includes for Europe. And I spoke with, as you know, Mark, the head of NATO, and he really wants to see something happen. It's very important for national security.
It's being reported that Health and Human Services released frozen funds to Planned Parenthood. I'm wondering why this happened and why Planned Parenthood is receiving any federal funds.
I don't know anything about that. Bobby, do you know anything about that?
What was the question?
It's being reported that frozen funds were released to Planned Parenthood in December by HHS. I'm wondering why that happened.
I haven't heard
I have not heard that.
I have not heard that.
Mr. President, on NATO, right now it sounds like you are saying that you would potentially acquire Greenland by force. That would be a NATO country.
Well, you're saying that.
Are you saying that? Would you do that?
No, you're saying that.
Would you
I
acquire
didn't
that by
say it.
force
No,
right
you're
now?
telling me that that's what I'm going to do. You don't know what I'm going to do.
So what are the options?
Your
then?
network
Because
doesn't know either.
The Danish foreign minister said that there's still fundamental differences after the meeting with Rubio and with the vice president. Are you willing to leave the NATO alliance in order to get what you want with Greenland? What are the options right now?
Well, I wouldn't be telling you what I'm willing to do, certainly. I'm not going to give up options, but it's very important. Greenland's very important for the national security, including of Denmark. And the problem is not a thing that Denmark can do about it if Russia or China wants to occupy Greenland. But there's everything we can do. You found that out last week with Venezuela. There's everything we can do about things such as that. Not going to happen. We're not, I can't rely on Denmark being able to fend themselves off. They were talking about they put an extra dog, and they were serious about this. They put an extra dog sled there last month. They added a second dog sled. That's not going to do the trick.
Denmark fought alongside the United States in both Afghanistan.
Thank you for
and
telling me
Iraq.
that. I appreciate it.
But
I have a very good relationship
they're
with
an
Denmark,
ally
and we'll
of the
see how it all
United
works out. I think something will work out. Yeah.
Venezuela, Cabello, the de facto number 2 in Venezuela right now, he seemed pretty reluctant to work with the U.S. And obviously he's
With us? They just gave us 50 million barrels of oil.
The number 2, the Venezuela security
I don't
chief.
know. I know the number 1. We just had a great conversation today, and she's a terrific person. I mean, she's somebody that we've worked with very well. Marco Rubio is dealing with her. I dealt with her this morning. We had a long call. We discussed a lot of things, and I think we're getting along very well with Venezuela. Yeah.
Straight ahead on Today as it happened.
One of the things that my doctor told me was, you got to cut back on your saturated fats. You got to cut back on your red meats. You got to eat the Mediterranean diet. And now you're telling me to pick up a glass of milk, not necessarily 2% or 1%, but drink the whole milk, eat a red steak. Who's right, you or my doctor? Because I am totally confused right now.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. I'm Andrew Rafferty. Let's jump right back into our rundown of our top stories of the day.
Trump administration is apologizing for deporting this Massachusetts college student despite a court order to keep her in the U.S. That is Amy Lucia Lopez Beloza. She was detained at Boston's airport trying to fly home for Thanksgiving, but instead she was sent to Honduras. An ICE officer mistakenly believed the court order no longer applied because she left Massachusetts. The 19-year-old Babson College freshman is now studying remotely from Honduras, the judge calling it a tragic bureaucratic mistake. U.S. housing market slump dragged into its fourth year in 2025. Home sales remain stuck at 30-year lows, partly due to rising prices and high mortgage rates. Sales of existing homes totaled just over $4 million last year. That was pretty much flat from 2024. The median home price topping $414,000. Mortgage rates dropping to 6.15% at year's end, but they remain about twice of what they were 6 years ago. The milk mustache is back. This time it is being pushed by the White House today. The president signing an executive order ending an Obama-era policy that ordered school lunch programs offer reduced fat milk. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins joins us now. Madam Secretary, thanks for being with us. A lot of people are going to be wondering right now, is it good for us? Was it bad for us under the prior administrations? Where do we stand with regards to milk?
Well, great to be on with you. Thank you. And I know y'all covered the new dietary guidelines last week. This is sort of the next step in that, is what has happened to America's health, America's children. What has happened? We have the highest chronic disease in American history. We're spending more on our healthcare costs than ever before. 90 cents of every dollar of healthcare costs goes to a chronic disease issue. And what we have seen is it all goes back to what we're eating, or at least a lot of it does. So the Secretary Kennedy and I, with the President Trump's vision and effectuating that, is really working to change that, especially those kids from marginalized communities, more vulnerable populations that may not have access to the best, healthiest food. And I think today is just one more step, getting whole milk back into schools, which has been proven for brain growth and activity and energy and bone strength, is just so important.
Madam Secretary, I'm one of those people in the world that basically 2 years ago had his chest cracked open because I had open heart surgery. And the reason? My arteries were clogged. And one of the things that my doctor told me was, you got to cut back on your saturated fats. You got to cut back on your red meats. You got to eat the Mediterranean diet. And now you're telling me to pick up a glass of milk, not necessarily 2% or 1%, but drink the whole milk, eat a red steak. Who's right, you or my doctor? Because I am totally confused right now.
Well, Del, I would definitely follow your doctor's advice. I would not tell you to have anything different than what he tells you. But what I will say is that just as a decade or so ago, when there was a war on red meat, a war on protein, a war on poultry, a war on whole milk, what we're finding is a whole generation of Americans, especially younger Americans, age 18 through 24. 3 out of 4 of those are not military ready. They could not pass a military readiness test. The level of obesity, the level of diabetes and prediabetes for that entire generation, research is showing is going back to a diet that focused on processed foods and ultra processed foods, and one that, instead of focusing on whole, real food, which is what we're trying to change here. And I think you'll see more rulemaking coming. The school lunch program, the USDA, Department of Agriculture that I represent, has about 16 different nutrition programs, from school lunches, et cetera. We're going to start recalibrating back to eating real food. That's the real message in all of this.
So when you say eating real food, if I'm a kid in school right now, what is the real food I should eat?
Well, everything from the proteins, the milk, the cheeses, the dairy, the veggies, the fruits, and it doesn't have to be fresh. I mean, frozen, canned, etc. Those are all things. I've heard my partner in all this, Secretary Bobby Kennedy, say if it comes in a plastic package for kids, that's probably not and shouldn't be at the top of the list. I know on your show before I've talked about SNAP and the food stamp program and how, more than 10% of that funding, billions and billions of dollars, is being used for sugary drinks and junk food. This is really just a reset for America and American health, and really to live the American dream. The health is the key component of that, and that's what we're really working to do.
Okay, let's play a game for our audience that now is going to be just as confused as I am. You can give me a yes or no, good or bad. Red meat, good or bad?
Good.
Whole milk,
very
good. Or bad?
Good.
2%
good.
Milk,
Very, very good. It's better than alternatives, but whole milk. But whole milk is for most is really the answer to a lot of these issues. But listen, 2% or skim milk is going to be better than a soda, a sugary drink. So all of it's in moderation, and all of it's just focusing on eating real food.
All right, let's have some fun. Coca-Cola, since we're going to be talking about sugary drinks, good or bad?
Well, listen, anything that is not whole, real food, instead of demonizing certain segments of our food industry, instead I'll just say really working to get nutrient-dense, rich foods onto our American families' plates. That's what we're focused on, and certainly through school lunches, through hospitals, through the military, through all of the above, the government can actually play a pretty significant role on the market-moving side of this, and then supporting our great American farmers, and not. So much has happened in consolidation. A lot of our foreign countries have come in and bought a lot of our farmland, consolidated a lot of our different agriculture industries, working to move that all back locally, but getting that nutrient-dense food into our schools and into our families' dining and kitchen rooms.
One final question before I let you go, and this is the fighting territory. Chocolate milk, good or bad?
Chocolate milk. Listen, I love a great glass of chocolate milk. Again, you could have a whole list in front of you and say, this is probably best, and that would be good whole milk. But any kind of milk is going to have some protein in it. We find that, especially with growing kids and the brain development, that's really, really important. So just drink milk. Drink whole milk is the best, but drink milk is great.
My grandchildren will love you, and we are on common ground on that. Questions provided by my cardiologist, Agricultural Secretary Brooke Rollins. Thanks for being with us today.
And just ahead on Today As It Happened, human rights groups are sounding the alarm over the killing of protesters in Iran as the regime cracks down on dissent. Stay with us for Scripps News correspondent Alex Miller's reporting as the death toll climbs after the break. You're watching Today As It Happens, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. Let's dive right back in.
House Oversight Chair James Comer saying the committee will vote next week to hold both Clintons in contempt of Congress. Today, Hillary Clinton defying a subpoena for her deposition in the committee's Jeffrey Epstein probe. The former president was scheduled to appear yesterday. He did not. The Clintons issued a letter calling the move partisan politics. Neither Clinton has been accused of any wrongdoing. Both deny any knowledge of Epstein's crimes. U.S. will push forward with the next phase of the Gaza peace plan. Trump envoy Steve Witkoff saying the focus shifts now to Hamas getting rid of its weapons and rebuilding the country. A transitional Palestinian authority will be established to oversee Gaza. Israel's prime minister saying his top priority, though, remains returning the final hostage body. Witkoff warning Hamas to comply fully or face serious consequences. In Iran, there are chilling images of bodies on the streets that are breaking through. Also, bodies piling up inside morgues. That internet blackout imposed by the regime starting to show a few holes. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live for us in New York. She has been tracking the threat of executions in the country. Alex, 26-year-old Irfan Sultani set to be executed today. Nightfall now in Tehran. What do we know about whether or not it occurred and what may have happened?
Well, Del, as far as we know, it did not occur today. It is about 1:30 a.m. in Tehran right now. Irfan Soltani would have been the first protester since this uprising began to be executed. He was set to be executed Wednesday by hanging. As far as we know, and from the experts that I've spoken with and those who are in communication with members of his family, he had not been able to get any sort of legal advice to defend himself, but he did have a 10-minute phone call with his relatives earlier, and they were told that his execution sentence had been finalized. This was leading into the day today. I spoke with a man who left Iran a little bit less than 5 years ago. He told me that these executions typically happen in the early morning hours ahead of the call to prayer. So essentially for him, his entire childhood was linked to this morning call to prayer, but also to finding out whether people had been executed for opposing the regime. And it really instilled a fear in him. Listen to what he told me.
Many in the West love the call to prayer in Islam. They find it in their Orientalist heart as appealing and beautiful. But people like me, like millions in Iran, we have woken up to news of death, of execution with that call to prayer. That's what we know is associated with it. It's a 4-decade nightmare. We are done. We are exhausted. How many loved ones I have to bury?
Now, Del, it's unclear the reasoning behind this, if it's because of the mounting international pressure specifically focused on him or whether it's just kind of a timing thing. Regardless, this could have at least bought him a few hours or days. It's unclear what the future really will look like for him, if this is just a postponement and not an indefinite postponement. But as of now, 1:30 in the morning, we do not know. We know that he likely has not been executed at this point.
Alex, though, the threat is very real. There are reports that as many as 10,000 people are in jails in Iran, even more than that. Are we looking at, excuse me, show trials for all 10,000 and possibly mass executions?
Yeah, we are looking at that as a very real possibility. Look, it's difficult to get legal counsel in Iran, from what I have been told. Attorneys are appointed by the state, judges are handpicked by the state, and so in that vein, typically they do not get a typical fair trial that we might expect here in the United States. I'm told that once these people are jailed, that typically they are interrogated and beaten for weeks on end before they appear for a trial. I'm told that they get makeup put on them so that they look much healthier, and then they go towards this trial. We're finding out a little bit about what these people are going to be charged with. Listen to what this could look like for them.
The judiciary and security forces have come out and announced that every person who has participated in these protests is going to be charged with muharabeh, which is enmity against Allah. It's a charge that is punishable with death. And the regime is going for it. When you are killing people in thousands on the streets, you are going to continue that behind closed doors as well.
So many people that I've spoken with want to see U.S. intervention in some capacity. They want to see Starlink opened up because they feel like light is the best disinfectant in this case, that the more people around the world are seeing the images that we just showed you on your screen, the more pressure it puts on the regime to stop killing people.
Thanks for spending some of your evening with Today As It Happened. I'm Andrew Rafferty. Have an excellent Wednesday night.